Okay, welcome to the final Hearts Academic Skills weekly webinar of 2025. Because this is the last session of the year, we're going to do some reflecting on things we've experienced and challenges we've faced and things that we've learnt this year. We're also going to use that as an opportunity to do some writing. And I will give feedback on any writing that I see in the Menti. So if you're watching a recording of this, feel free to, I think it's a good idea to just spend the time doing the writing anyway. I'm a strong believer in kind of what you can gain from writing in a journal and just writing for yourself. It's all good practice and it's good thinking time. It's a good time just to take care of yourself a little bit. So if you're watching a recording of this or you can't join the Menti, then please do just try to write something down on paper or type or write on your phone. Do respond to the different prompts that I give you. The majority of this session will be about me asking you some questions for you to write answers to. Please feel free to put questions in the chat, but there's also time to ask questions at the end. So we'll be reflecting on 2025 and thinking also about like what you might want to do and what goals you have for 2026. So first question for you. There's only 3 people in the Menti, so maybe you can give me more than one word each, otherwise we won't have a word cloud, we'll just have a couple of words. But if you haven't joined the Menti yet, please do follow the link in the chat, which is also on Canvas. And can you give me one word? I'm going to assume that if you're in this webinar or you're watching this video, it's your first term at the University of Hertfordshire. So can you give me one word that describes your first term at UH at Herts? If it's not your first term, you can just give me one word that describes this this term from the end of September to now. Well, that's a good start with the word good. Thank you to the first person to respond. We've got a few more people in the Menti now, so please do type in your words. If you're not able to access the Menti but you want to put words in the chat, you can put words in the chat and I'll enter them into the Menti for you. I can see someone is already doing that. Okay. We'll try and unpack not as expected later on. And if there's anything that anything that you want to share in the Menti is great. Anything that you don't want to share in the Menti but you want to kind of share separately, that's also fine. You could, if something comes up and you think, I'd actually like to explore this a little bit further, you can email me and we can arrange a conversation afterwards. But look at that. We had one good, multiple stressful. Tough, spelled T-U-F-F. That's okay. Oh dear, I'm really sorry about torture. I'm going to add my words to this as well, because I'm a human too. Okay. Tough, tiring, torture, 3 T's, not as expected, stressful, varied, good. what we're going to do, well, I'll ask you for a few more details about some of the challenges, but we'll also spend some time focusing on the positives as well. Because I think one of the tricky things, one of the difficult things about studying is that you can be working really hard or doing reading all of the time. And if you're constantly meeting new things and constantly finding things that are kind of pushing your knowledge or pushing you out of your comfort zone, maybe you can always feel you can feel stressed all the time and busy all the time and overworked and maybe a bit confused. But then if you stop and think back to where you were 2 months ago, you might think, actually, it's been hard work, but I know a lot more about all of this stuff now than I did 2 months ago. I would say that describes life for me at the moment. Okay, so what we're doing today is reflecting. Why should we reflect? Well, the idea is, or what I'd like to persuade you of, is that reflection helps us to achieve our goals. And I'll say something in a moment about how that might be the case. But it's also a fact that reflection is an essential part of professional life. Every year that I've been working, and I've been working for about 30 years, I guess, or rather every year I have worked after I graduated, I've had to do some kind of reflection every year in an appraisal as part of my professional development, or even as part of my contract in a place of work. I also believe, and I think lots of people would agree, that reflection will help you to learn. Now, in the last webinar, we saw this quote, and I think quite a few people in the previous webinar were familiar with this. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the different results. If you Google that, you might find some people claiming that Einstein said it. Well, as we saw last week, Einstein never said that, but I think we might agree, and you can give me a thumbs up if you agree, that there is some sense in this, right? That often in life we tend to do things the same way that we've always done them, or we fall into the same kind of mistakes. We do things the same way every day, every month, and certain things don't seem to get better. So if we don't change anything, but we expect things to be the same, like to get the same results, or we expect to get better, if we don't change the way that we study or organize ourselves, we shouldn't expect to achieve better standards in our studies. We shouldn't expect to feel more organized, right? So there is a kind of really obvious point to this. If we don't change anything, then we don't learn anything, and we don't see any benefits. We don't see anything better happening. So that's a kind of basic idea behind why it might be good to reflect, how it might help us to learn, and in turn help us to achieve objectives. In relation specifically to how we learn, well, reflecting is a way of preventing ourselves from doing the same things over and over again. Reflecting helps us to answer questions like, how can we learn from our mistakes? How can we learn from our experiences? How can we do better next time? And what can we take from our learning, our experience, our mistakes into the future? So I'm going to ask you a couple of simple questions, and then we'll explore how we might add these things together. So we've got 10 people in the Menti. The link is in the chat. If you haven't already joined, please do. You will benefit most from this webinar if you're able to answer the questions. So you might want to do that privately. You might be watching a recording and you just want to write those things down. But it will be even better if you're in the room live and you're able to type your answers into the Menti and share them with others, and then we can compare I'll make some comments and I'll try to draw some things together. In answer to my first question, which asked you kind of like what your first term at Hertfordshire was like, one person wrote not as expected. So what has most surprised you about studying here so far? So what has surprised you? Some people, we will talk about very specific challenges later, but this is just asking you, what is not what you expected? I was most surprised about how hectic and packed the schedule has been. Oh, that's nice. Very kind professors. I'll let you into a secret. Well, it's not a secret, but just so that you know, in UK universities, not many academic staff are actually professors. Professor is a title that you earn through going through various kind of stages and processes and applications, and it's a high status academic title, professor. So actually, the majority of people who teach you, whether you're at Hertfordshire or any other university, the majority of people who teach you are not professors. Now, if you go and study in the United States, you might refer to everyone as a professor. I was really fortunate with my first ever teaching job. My first ever teaching job where I was paid was in Italy. And in Italy, obviously they speak Italian. The Italian word for teacher is professoro, that's masculine, or professora for a woman. And that was a long time ago. It was last century. It was before euros. So the currency in Italy at the time was called lira, and it was like thousands of lira for £1, I think, or hundreds of lira was £1. So my very first teaching job, I was a professor, and my salary was 1.8 million every month. So I would say my life is 26 years later, I'm not a professor and I don't earn 1.8 million in a decade, but you know, I'm very happy. So we've got assignments and lectures, facilities. That sounds like it's a positive surprise. Kind professors sounds like it's a positive surprise. How hectic and packed the schedule has been, that's really interesting. I wonder if the surprise is, feel free to put it in the chat or add another box. I'd be interested to know if it's hectic and packed because your timetable is just like 3 or 4 days a week. Sometimes if your timetable is spread over 5 days a week, it will be a bit more calm. But a lot of programs, especially at master's level, it's not all 5 days a week. So the days that you do come to campus, it's a bit more packed and a bit more hectic. But I do appreciate that in student life, there are lots of different things that fill up your time and make it feel hectic. And if you've come to the UK to study, and wherever you consider your home, someone does the cooking and the cleaning for you. You come here, you realise how much of your time is taken up with stuff like that, right? Okay. Another question for you. Would you say this semester has been, I think I can guess, I've got 11 people in the Menti. I'd love to see at least 8 answers to this question. It's just multiple choice, so you just have to choose one or the others. Would you say this semester has been more challenging than you were expecting, less challenging than you were expecting, or would you say it's been what you were expecting? This is really interesting. Now, I learned a long time ago to use the word challenging, not difficult. Later, I'm going to give you a form to fill in, and I do use the word difficult. But here I'm using the word challenging because I think challenging isn't always a bad thing. Like if life is never challenging, then it could be quite boring. But okay, so most of you who have answered, a large majority of you who have answered have said it was more challenging than you were expecting. Please do vote on the Menti, if only to let me know that you are here and paying attention and that everything is working. I'll just give it 5 more seconds. So last chance to vote. Please vote quickly if you can. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you for that late vote. So what challenges have you faced? Take your time, be calm, maybe write this as a sentence. You don't have to write just like one-word answers. So what are the, you said it's been more challenging than you were expecting. So what are the challenges that you have faced? And these could be challenges that you've overcome, or they could be challenges that you're still experiencing. But yeah, what are your challenges? Well, that's interesting. 2 people straight away. Maybe in the Microsoft Teams chat, if you prefer, because you might not be able to do this through the Menti. I think a challenge with a problem with timetables is that everyone has a different idea of what a perfect timetable would be. So we'll never have a timetable that makes everyone happy. But in the chat, do you want to say like, is the problem that you don't have enough breaks between classes, or you have too many hours in one day? And if you could have more days, but calmer days, like what would you prefer? Would you prefer to have more days but fewer lessons? Or would you prefer to have more breaks between lessons on the days that you're here? Feel free to put that into the chat. How much is a Unibus now? Feel free to use the chat to tell me, but being able to live alone, find a job and time management, yeah. I mean, it's not surprising, is it? If you're living alone, working, studying, time management is bound to be a challenge there. Cafeteria is too costly. So I'm a member of staff. I get paid to come here, but I also cannot afford to eat in the cafeteria all the time. So I bring food from home. There are places where you can warm up your food on campus. If you don't know how to find those places, you can send a message afterwards and we'll help. Okay. Interesting though that most like these are all related to kind of maybe time and money, right? But so far nobody's talked about kind of like knowledge and work, as in like academic work. So to think about those are the challenges you've had, but I guess you've probably tried to do something to overcome those challenges. So what have you been able to do in order to overcome the challenges you faced? Or what are you currently doing in order to overcome those challenges? And this is the key here. It's easy to think about like what our problems are or what we're finding difficult. The key to success or to happiness, just to making things work, to surviving, is to find a way to overcome that challenge. So what have you been able to do in order to overcome those challenges? When you say adjust, maybe give a thumbs up, do you mean like you could just cope with it now in a way that you couldn't at first? Because I don't know if this, thank you. I don't know if this is your experience. My experience in life has been, there have been times in my life when I've been like working in a school where I taught for 30 hours every week. And actually, although that's hard work, after a couple of days, I got used to it, and I could manage a 30. I probably couldn't manage a 30-hour week for forever, maybe even for a year. But for the period of time when I was doing it, I was fine. But I had a 3-month period in 2009 when I'd managed to get like 2 really good jobs. One really good job, spring and summer in the UK, and a good job that was kind of autumn in Japan. And then that gave me a 3-month break every year. And well, I thought I could get 3 months of like just nothing every year. And I could travel the world. And I thought that would be amazing. But actually, after about 2 months, I've realized I just couldn't do anything. When I didn't have any kind of schedule, I became incapable of doing anything. Like going to a post office and posting one letter, I'd go and do that, and then I'd go back to my room and think, oh my gosh, I'm tired now. So I do think that we do adjust to the schedules that we have in life. No one wants you to have a really stressful time, but I do think it happens. So someone said that they use a to-do list to remember important tasks. I will, hopefully I'm not sharing my secrets with you, as in secret information. But like on my notes for this week, so I write down like to-do lists every day, and I use the reminder app on my phone. But at the beginning of every week, I like just take 2 pages of a notebook, and here I have like a list of priorities for the week, and down here I have things to push forward to future weeks, because we can't do everything we want to do every week. And then every other box on these 2 pages is a day of the week. I've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday is one. And at the beginning of the week, I try to make my to-do list like different things for each day. I'm not always realistic. I don't always manage to get everything done, but that's how I try to organize my to-do list. And I do recommend trying to use different systems, and to find like what works for you. But a digital to-do list can be good. You all have Microsoft accounts, so you could use Microsoft Tasks within that. I use the Apple Reminder app, and then I can add things to it on my phone, and I won't forget them, and I can organize them by week, every week. So if you are struggling with time management and you want to try something like that, then I recommend it's worth doing. Okay, let's talk about something positive now. And I've got 13 people in the Menti, so it would be great to have more than 2 responses this time. This is the last webinar of the year, so I really want to see a few more responses, please. So think back over the last, it's December the 9th. I don't know when you started your course. You might have started your course at the end of September, maybe a little bit before that, maybe a little bit later. You might have traveled to the UK before that. So think back over the last 3 months. I'm sure that you've got some things that you achieved that are pretty good and that you'd never done before. Maybe no one else in your family has ever done them. I'm sure there's at least one thing that you feel proud of over the last 3 months. there might be multiple things that you're proud of. So what do you feel most proud of and why? So give me what you feel proud of and why that makes you proud. When you say you've overcome all the assignments, do you mean you've completed them? I'm proud of my cooking, which I didn't do back in my home country. Good for you, but if this was a regular class, we would be able to see who just said that, and we would all be expecting an invitation to dinner. But well done for your cooking. Hope you're enjoying it and it's keeping you healthy. I learned to live independently and become self-independent. If the schedule was very tight and you haven't missed many classes, then I think that might be something to feel proud of. You're here now, so I don't know if at the start of the semester, did you have good digital skills? Were you able to do things like attend webinars and do kind of online learning the way that you're doing at the moment? You've probably learned how to use all the university systems like Canvas and Teams, like on this call, using the learning resource centers, accessing things to read, accessing your timetable, finding the different services at university. Feeling proud about arriving at the UK all alone because that's my first time in life I've traveled away from my parents. I mean, that's incredible, really, isn't it? Like, first time you travel away and you're staying for quite a long time. That's not the same as just going on holiday for a week or two. Well done. I'll give it another moment to see if anyone else wants to share what they're proud of. But I hope you can all think of one or two things that you do feel proud of. I'm proud of traveling alone in a new country, settling down, studying hard, and most importantly, enjoying student life. Great, as well as learning new skills. Fantastic. I'd love to, as my job title is Associate Director of Academic Skills, so I'm always keen to know what skills you think you've learnt. I'm proud that I'm living all alone in this country and doing all the work by myself. I just realised that I could survive out my comfort zone. Absolutely. If you've pushed yourself this far, you know that you can push yourself in other situations as well, and you'll get through them. Excellent. I find it very interesting that most of these things are about life, or about independence. They're not actually about studying. That's absolutely fine, but that might be the thing that you feel most proud about. I realised how good I am coming to the UK and living the life I wish for. Becoming a gentleman. I like that. And I'm glad it's the life that you wished for. Thank you for these responses. I'm enjoying reading them so much that I don't really want to move on. I just want to make sure that I'm allowing enough time for everyone to answer. My own contribution here is the one about being able to stay calm in some very stressful moments. Now, if my wife ever watches the recording of this, I think she might be surprised to see that. She might think that I don't stay calm, but I try my best. Okay, I'm not going to press the next slide button yet because I appreciate you might still be writing into the Menti. If you're still writing into the Menti and I press next slide, then you're going to lose what you've written. So if you asked, I am going to move on, but before I do, if you're writing into the Menti, just copy and paste your text somewhere else so that you don't lose it. And I'll just count down from 5 to give you time to do that, because you might be writing something really important and I don't want you to lose it. So you can finish it later. You can send it to me if you like. My email address is m.holloway3@hearts.ac.uk, and I'm always happy to read about things that you're proud of. Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Next. This question, you might think your answer to this, the most important thing you've learned, might be exactly the same as your last answer about the thing that you're most proud of. If that's the case, let's think about academic. Let's give this an academic focus. So in terms of, yes, life is not expected. In terms of your studies in your subject area or academic skills, like relating to thinking, organizing, writing, presenting and interacting, anything numerical, anything with maths, working with data, or anything about your particular subject, what do you think is the most important thing you've learned academically this semester? Okay. We can do a lot of research with C. elegans. I feel like I know what C. elegans means, and I've forgotten, but I'll Google it. Microscopes have different lenses. Mass spectrometry is done in lab. Patients focus and not to give up of anything you're passionate about. As the semester goes on, assignments follow you more. Yeah, I mean, that's the value of managing your time though, right? Even the simplest cells communicate, and without communication, there's no life on Earth, and vice versa. Communication is very important. Tips to organize an academic text by adding the relevant academic literature supported with my opinions. You didn't get that from me because I use the word position, not opinions. Doing research and completing lab reports, poster presentations with less plagiarism. Okay, that's not the same as no plagiarism. How to think critically. If you feel like you're learning how to speak and write about your reading That would be really interesting for me to know. I really hope C. elegans C. elegans, a model organism to study animal development and behavior. Wow, a free living transparent nematode about 1 millimeter in length. I'm going to try and find out more about C. elegans. Fantastic. Okay. Lovely. Again, if you're typing into Menti, I'm going to move on now. So please copy and paste your text somewhere else, put it in a note, complete it later. Send me your thoughts if you'd like to. I'm going to count down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. Now, you'll notice my question changes now. So I asked you what you learnt, and now I'm asking you, so what? Like, why is that learning important? And someone in the last slide said that they learned to think critically. Okay, so this is how we start reflecting critically. We don't just say, oh, I learnt how to cook jollof rice, for example. It's like, well, so what? What difference does that make? How does that change your life? How does that change the world? Whatever it was that you've learnt this semester, why is that learning important? What difference does it make? How does it change you? How does it change the world? And what you can do to yourself or to your friends if you want to kind of push each other for quality and high standards. If you're saying to survive in a big community and be unique and don't follow the crowd, I might say, all right, so what? Why is that important? Why is it important not to follow the crowd? I think I know the answer to why is it important to survive in a big community. I know why it's important to survive, but why are big communities important? For anyone who's joined the Menti since I last shared the link, there's a link in the chat. You can join. And if you didn't see the previous question was about the most important thing you've learnt in this term. What have you learnt in the last 3 months? So develop new skills which will be useful in the future. Like useful, why? How will those skills be useful? Be specific. What are you going to use them for? Who are they useful to? Like when I hear some people talking about artificial intelligence and the things that it's going to do, some of those things I think, well, so what? Like, how is that going to make my life better? How is that going to make the world better? It might make some people richer. Is it going to make anyone poorer? Is it going to make anyone less happy? Is it going to take away anyone's jobs? A new technology that's useful for one person isn't necessarily useful for everyone. However, I'm going to write in the chat the name of if you have, maybe you have a student account, access to Amazon Prime, or maybe you can find this somewhere else, but there's a documentary called The Thinking Game about the developer of DeepMind and the development of DeepMind. And there is someone who talks about like AI being useful and being really specific about what it's useful for within science, to the point where they won a Nobel Prize for chemistry. I recommend watching that if you get the time. I know you've already got very busy schedules, but you have a break coming up. Okay, I appreciate that. So what is a more difficult question? So I asked you, what did you find difficult? What have you found challenging? What did you do to overcome the challenges? What are you proud of? What have you learned? And then suddenly ask, so what? Why is that important? Okay, so the learning is important in this case because it leads to a positive outcome. I guess like making a, studying in another place and learning about the differences. Okay. I'll wait a few moments to see if anyone else wants to add an answer. I've got a couple more questions. So I'm going to beneficial in future job roles. Yeah, okay. Learning is important because it makes you more employable. It gives you more opportunities in the future. I get that. You want to be able to apply for a job and perform in a job interview and show your skills in a way that is going to give you what you want. I'm going to move the slide on in 5 seconds. So if you're writing something that you haven't finished, please copy and paste it somewhere else so that you don't lose it. So it'll be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Next slide. I'm going to move on from this question because some people already started to use it. So why is the learning important? Another way of thinking about why is that learning important is to ask, what are you going to do with that learning in the future? I think they're related questions. Yeah, and now a question for you, thinking really specifically, today is the 9th of December. The term ends on the 12th of December, and then we have a break at the university until the 5th of January. I know some of you will have assignments to do over that time, but you'll also have some time off, I hope. Maybe you're going to travel, maybe you'll visit, maybe you'll just spend some time relaxing. And then you're going to come back and it will be 2026. So what are you going to do differently next year? Let's hear about some concrete things that you might do differently next year. And some people might have already written about things that they are going to do differently, or they've adapted, and so they've already started doing certain things differently. But some of those things you've already started. What about next year? What are you going to do differently next year? Look for a part-time job. And in that search for a part-time job, anything specific that you're going to do differently? What is the part-time job that you want to do? Sometimes there are jobs in my team. I don't think we have any at the moment, but we employ students to make phone calls to other students. And we advertise those jobs on Handshake. If you're not using Handshake to look for jobs, then check your university emails, because I'm sure you're invited by my colleagues in the careers and employability to use those resources. Start my boxing? Do you mean like boxing? Keen to know more about that. See family, good. But this is like, what are you going to do differently, like in terms of your day to day? Better time management, a lot of studying beforehand. I would recommend, yeah, you can pray that you can complete all the assignments on time, but actually, the person who said better time management and a lot of studying beforehand, I think you don't have to pray, because you can just manage your time differently. In these weekly webinars, I've spoken about about how you might tackle assignments and how you break those things down. What we haven't really done is how to really break down your time. There was one webinar where we talked about the number of hours you have in a week, and to kind of break down the things that you need to do and allocate hours to it, put them in a calendar, give yourself a schedule. So instead of, you might feel that your current schedule is really hectic and stressful, but if you plan how you're going to use your time to study, to read, to write every week, that can help you to feel a little bit more like you're in control of your time. So I'd recommend trying to do that. Okay, I'm going to move the slides on in 5 to 10 seconds. So if you're writing something in Menti and you want to save it, please copy and paste it somewhere else and keep it in a note so that you don't lose it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Oh, sorry, this is a repeat. Okay, so that's pretty much everything I wanted to ask you. I'm just going to say a couple of things about frameworks, because in university writing and thinking about the kind of work you're given at university, you'll often meet the word framework. It might be that when you're doing your dissertation, the word framework becomes really important, but you've probably met the word framework already. And frameworks can be really useful for managing your time, managing your work. They can be particularly useful for like thinking and writing. So earlier on today, I showed you a really simple framework. So this is just the way that I organize my week in a kind of paper diary. And what we've been doing so far with the questions I've given you is actually applying a framework from 2001 by Rolfe et al. I'm going to tell you in a moment about Gibbs' reflective cycle that you might have seen before, but I've actually been asking you questions in line with this framework, which is really simple. So Rolfe et al. In 2001, actually in a kind of, this is a framework that they had. It was an existing framework that they just adapted. It comes actually from the world of nursing, but I think it's useful in lots of different areas. And Rolfe et al. Simply ask 3 questions. And so this is a way of reflecting on experience, reflecting on learning. The 3 questions are: what, so what, now what? So what, describe the situation. So what, like, so what does, interpret it, what does that mean? Why is that important? Now what, like, what have you learned from that, and what will you do in the future differently? And if you remember the questions I asked you earlier, I was basically asking you these questions. What have you learned? You know, what did you experience? What challenges did you face? What did you learn? What were your proudest moments? And then so what? What does that mean? Why are those things important? And almost most importantly, how does that change your future? What can you learn from your experience that you can take forward, do things differently, learn better, perform better, achieve what you want? And like, something I love about this is just like, it's 5 words. So it's really easy to remember. You can apply it in lots of different situations. You could, at the end of every week, if you want to get into some good thinking habits next year, at the end of every week, you could ask yourself, what have I achieved this week? So what? And what next? Or what have I found difficult this week? So what? Why is that important? So what am I going to do differently next week? Just a really simple way. You can do it. Some people do this kind of thing every night just before sleeping. They think, well, what did I achieve today? So you end on something positive. Or what am I grateful for today? Like, so what? Why does that matter? And what am I going to do tomorrow? What am I going to do differently? What am I going to do better tomorrow? So some people like to do things like that. I know that we have a few people attending these workshops who are studying education. So Gibbs reflective cycle is probably more familiar to people in education, but I think it's quite applicable to lots of areas of work and life. And Gibbs reflective learning cycle, it's more than 5 words, right? But it typically starts with thinking about a problem, a challenge, maybe an achievement, thinking about describing it, what happened, what were you remembering what you thought and what you felt at the time, what was good and bad about the experience, what does that mean, what sense can you make of it, what conclusions can you draw, and how can you reflect on what else you might have done. And then if it happens again, what would you do differently? So that's very similar to that looking back, reflecting and looking forward, but in more stages. So if any of you through these webinars need to do a reflective writing, I know some people have to do a reflective learning journal, you may have instructions that tell you exactly which framework you should use for that. But if you're allowed to choose, then you could choose something like what, so what, now what, or you could use Gibbs. And that really changes the way that we write, because it just gives us a series of questions and prompts. That's why it's called a framework. It kind of helps to support you. So instead of just starting with a blank page, you're starting with a set of questions or headings, and then you could start by even like using a voice note and recording your own voice. You could use these questions to interview yourself, or to ask a friend to interview you, and like record your thoughts in speaking if you feel more confident speaking than writing. Once you've got that, you can transcribe it. You've got words on the page, then you can go back and edit it into a piece of writing that you feel proud of. So there you go. These are examples of frameworks, Rolf et al. And Gibbs. And that's where we're going to end for 2025. So I hope there's something from that you could take away for today and for the future. I think a lot of the things that you've told me have been related to kind of stress and being busy and finding it difficult to organise time, or finding it difficult to be independent. So I do think using one of these frameworks to really think and maybe write just for yourself, it doesn't matter if that's in English or another language, about what it is that you've found difficult or interesting or challenging, surprising, exciting, things that have made you proud this semester, what you can learn from that, and really importantly, what kind of plans you can make for 2026 to grow stronger and better. And I just want to go back to the slide where you were telling me what you were proud about, because I love that. So do think back to what you felt proud about this year, and think about the things that you want to be proud of when you're reflecting back on the first 3 months of the year in April, for example, in April 2026. Okay, so I hope that's given you some things to take away from today's seminar, webinar. All of the recordings of all of the webinars from this semester are on Canvas, so you can go back and look at them at any time. They're all on YouTube as well, so there's just a YouTube list. You could listen through them or look through the transcripts. If you have any questions, there is no question too small or too big. After this slide, I will give you a link to a Microsoft form, which is a little bit different this week because it allows you to register your attendance of this webinar, but it also gives you the opportunity to request a certificate and give some feedback on the webinars in general if you'd like to. But if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask before we go, at the moment there are no questions. I'll give it a minute because I'm happy to use the time to try and answer any of them. Every week when I email you about these webinars, there is a link to the Hearts Academic Skills Canvas site. I always link just to the one page that has these webinars on. But if you're from that page, you click on home, you'll see the rest of the site. On that site, there are resources about thinking, organizing, writing, interacting, and the kind of services that are available to you at the university. The academic skills consultations that my team provide through the Learning Resource Centres every day in term time, they end this Friday in terms of in-person consultations, but you can get online consultations all through the break and through to the beginning of January. And details of how to do that are all on the Canvas site. So you just follow the links that I have sent you by email. Thank you very much for this comment. That's really nice to hear. I've mentioned that, you know, I'm feeling very old these days. I'll be 51 this weekend, but that means I've been teaching for quite a long time, and I really like to see your responses in the Menti, but teaching an online webinar is very different to teaching in person. And I haven't had a chance to get to know any people who've been attending. So it's nice to hear that idea of like you're talking to someone who understands you, because I feel like I'm mostly talking to myself, and I do that so that you can relax a little bit while you're. This is how a webinar works, right? A webinar is one person speaking a lot and people messaging via a Menti. But thank you very much for that comment. There are opportunities to leave other comments via this form. I know I'm going to try before I'm asked to just in Teams, I will share a link to this form. There you go. So you can click on the link in Teams and it will take you to the form within a browser. You'll see it's a little bit different this week because it's not just about recording your attendance, but at question number 3, it asks you, would you like to receive a certificate? That would be like a PDF certificate. But if you want a certificate, we'll find a way to produce one for you. I've not done this before, but I'm happy to try. And then some general comments about the webinars, any difficulties you've had with the webinars, and whether you would like to attend webinars next year, how you would like them, and any requests you'd like. So, like, none of those questions are compulsory. If you just want to record your attendance and close the form and submit the form, you can do that. But I'd be really interested to see your answers to all the other questions. Okay. So let me go back to that. That's the end of our series of 9 academic skills webinars for 2025. Depending on what I see in the form, we might do some more in 2026. We've got other kinds of classes that will run in 2026 as well. And if you've been attending these webinars, then I will send you emails about what comes next in January. If you want to follow up on any of the things that we've discussed today, and if you've had problems or difficulties, challenges that you don't feel like you've overcome and you feel like you could do with some help with, please do email me directly at m.holloway3@hearts.ac.uk, or email HAS, which is Hearts Academic Skills, at hearts.ac.uk, and we'll respond. You can also use the drop-in services that I've spoken about before. I hope you all managed to get some rest and relaxation. I know you've had a busy and stressful time. Spend some time thinking, try and get some rest and relaxation. Try and enjoy yourself over the break, while also keeping on top of any work that you need to do. Take some time to remember how far you've come since September, because although it's hard work and on a day-to-day basis, it can feel like you're not making any progress. When you stop every month or 2 months and look back, I think you'll find you will have made a lot of progress. And I hope you feel proud of the successes that you've made. So have a good evening, everyone, and hopefully see you soon. Bye-bye.